Elias Ward lived a quiet life far from the noise of the growing towns of the West. His ranch was small, only a few wooden fences, a worn stable, and a house built from the hands of his father years ago. Life was simple there. He woke before sunrise, fed the animals, cleaned the barn, repaired whatever needed fixing, and ended each day sitting on his porch watching the sky turn orange. He liked peace. He liked being alone. But he was not a man who turned away from people who needed help. Anyone who passed by his land knew him as the gentle rancher who shared water, tools, or food without asking for anything in return. One late afternoon, a group of traveling traders came walking along the dusty road. Their horses looked tired, and one of their wagons shook badly as if something was broken underneath. Elias saw them from his porch and stood up immediately. He knew that travelers often struggled in this part of the country. The land was rough, dry, and lonely. So he walked to the road and asked them if they needed anything. The traders explained that one of their wagon wheels had cracked earlier, and they had been struggling for hours to keep it moving. Elias offered them water and invited them to bring the wagon closer so he could take a look. As the sun dropped lower, Elias worked under the wagon, tightening bolts and adding pieces of wood to stabilize the wheel. The traders watched him with tired smiles, grateful for someone who still offered kindness without expecting payment. When the wheel finally turned smoothly again, they thanked him loudly, full of relief. They sat with him for a while, sharing dried meat and stories from their journey. Elias listened quietly. He always enjoyed hearing about faraway places, even if he never felt the need to travel himself. During their talk, one of the traders mentioned something unusual. Not a danger on the road, not a shortage of supplies, but a story about a mountain tribe living beyond the distant ridges. The trader said that the tribe had a tradition unlike anything he had seen. Every few years, they searched for a husband, for a woman they called the Giant Bride. Her name was Marana, and she was known not only for her height, but also for her strength. According to the trader, she stood taller than most men, and had the kind of presence that made people step back without thinking. Another trader added a dramatic detail. He said that no man had ever lasted long with her, not because she wished anyone harm, but because men became frightened the moment they realized she was not like others. Some men tried to impress her and failed. Some tried to compete with her and lost. Some ran away before even speaking to her properly. The tribe believed that her future husband needed to be calm, strong of heart, and respectful of their customs. Then the trader leaned closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret known only among travelers. "People say she warns every man with the same words," he said. "She tells them, 'No man survived a night with me.'" This. Elias did not react with fear or laughter. He simply raised an eyebrow. The traders expected him to shake his head or act shocked, but instead, he asked a simple question. "Why does she say that? Why?" The traders explained that the words were not a threat. They were more like a warning born from loneliness. Every man who had walked into her lodge left before dawn, too afraid of her size or too ashamed to admit they felt small next to her. She had been left heartbroken many times, and the tribe feared she would never find a partner. Elias sat quietly, thinking. He had met many people in his life, some loud, some proud, some gentle, some lost. Everyone carried something inside them. Sometimes pain, sometimes longing. The story of Marana did not sound frightening to him. It sounded sad. Night settled over the ranch, and the traders decided to camp near his barn. Elias brought them blankets and stayed to help secure their horses. As they worked, the traders spoke again about the tribe. They said that anyone who passed the tribe's tests could earn great respect and valuable gifts. One of them even suggested that Elias should go with them in the morning to see the tribe for himself. They insisted he was strong, calm, and honest, perhaps exactly the kind of man the tribe was searching for. Elias laughed lightly, not mockingly, but softly, in his quiet way. He told them he had no interest in rewards. But the story of Marana stayed in his mind longer than he expected. Long after the traders fell asleep, he sat outside under the night sky, thinking about a woman who was feared for something she never chose, a woman who had been judged before anyone tried to know her. Morning came with gold across the horizon. The traders prepared to continue their journey and asked Elias one last time if he wanted to come. He looked at his ranch, at the quiet fields and the unpainted fences. Nothing here needed him urgently today. So he surprised himself when he said, "All right, I'll come with you. Just for a look." They traveled through winding paths, rocky hills, and narrow trails until they finally reached the mountain tribe's territory. Wooden structures stood among tall trees, and people dressed in woven clothing moved with practiced rhythm. The tribe noticed them immediately. Some looked startled to see an outsider, but many were simply curious. Then she appeared, Marana. She stepped out from behind a wooden pillar, tall enough that her head nearly brushed the hanging decorations overhead. Her features were strong, yet gentle. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes held a mix of caution and quiet hope. Elias watched her step forward, and he understood instantly why men feared her, not because she was frightening, but because she carried her strength openly, without hiding it. The elders greeted the traders and asked who Elias was. When they learned he had come on his own choice, they studied him carefully. Marana approached him, her footsteps firm against the ground. She looked down at him, not with pride but with honesty, as if trying to see what kind of man he truly was. Then she spoke the words he had heard the night before. "No man survived a night with me." The traders glanced nervously at Elias, expecting him to step back or lower his eyes. But instead, Elias simply looked up at her without fear or discomfort. He could see she was not boasting. She was warning him so he would not feel trapped or tricked. Elias answered in a calm, steady voice, "Try me and see." A quiet wave passed through the tribe. They were not used to men responding like that without fear, without challenge, simply with confidence and sincerity. Marana blinked, unsure how to react. For a moment, Elias thought she might even smile. But she quickly hid the expression and stepped back as the elders discussed what would happen next. The tribe explained that Marana's future husband had to complete a set of tests, not to prove he was stronger than her, but to show he had the heart and patience to stand beside her. These tests were meant to reveal character, not physical power. Many men had failed not because they were weak, but because they were unwilling to understand her or respect her ways. Elias agreed to take the tests without hesitation. The elders were surprised but impressed by his calmness. They prepared the first trial while the tribe gathered to watch. As Elias waited, he saw Marana standing at a distance, her expression uncertain. He sensed she had been hurt many times, judged by people who never tried to see the person behind her size. He felt no fear, not of her strength, not of the tests, not of the tribe. Instead, he felt curious, almost protective in a quiet way. He wondered what kind of life she lived, what hopes she kept hidden, and why her warning carried so much sadness. He had come only to look, only to help the traders. But now, standing in front of the tribe and their tall, strong, misunderstood bride, he felt something shift inside him, something that made him stay, something that told him this journey had a purpose he had not seen at first. And as the tribe prepared the first test, Elias stepped forward with steady steps, ready to face whatever waited for him, not for a reward, but because he wanted to understand the truth behind Marana's words. The first test began soon after the elders finished their discussion. Elias stood in the open field as members of the tribe arranged heavy wooden crates, sacks of dried grain, and tools scattered along a long dirt path. The elders explained that this was the endurance test. It was simple, but difficult. He had to carry supplies from one end of the path to the other until everything had been moved. Men in the past had rushed at the beginning, trying to show how strong they were, and then collapsed halfway. Some complained, some gave up, and some tried to cheat. The elders told Elias that the test was not about speed or showing off. It was about patience, control, and steady strength. Elias nodded. He did not boast or question anything. He simply bent down, picked up the first crate, and began walking. His steps were slow, but sure. Dust rose with every footstep, and the sun pressed hard on his shoulders. The tribe watched from the side. Some whispered that he looked too calm, too relaxed, as if he didn't understand how hard the test was. But he kept walking, returning again and again to pick up the next bag or tool. Marana stood among the watchers, her tall figure casting a long shadow. She had seen many men take this test. Most of them tried to impress her, flexing their arms or shouting to show how tough they were. But Elias was different. He worked quietly, breathing evenly, carrying each load with steady hands. When he got tired, he paused for a moment, wiped his forehead, and continued without complaint. It surprised her more than she expected. Halfway through the test, one of the elders stepped closer to check on him. "Are you doing well?" he asked. Elias nodded. "I'm fine. Do you want water?" Elias shook his head gently. "Not yet. I'll finish this row first." His voice was calm, but not forced. He was not trying to act brave. He was simply honest. This small moment made a few tribe members exchange glances. None of the men who tried before him had ever refused water. They always tried to appear strong, but collapsed soon after. Elias did not try to appear anything. He simply worked. By the time he placed the last wooden crate at the far end of the field, the sun was high, and sweat covered his face and shirt. But Elias did not show any frustration or exhaustion. He only stretched his shoulders and stepped back. The elders nodded in approval. The first test was over. The second test was different and more dangerous. It was the courage test, which took place in the narrow canyon behind the tribe's settlement. The canyon was known for its deep shadows and echoing sounds. Wild animals sometimes passed through, and the environment itself was enough to disturb a man's mind. Many men in the past became frightened by the darkness and strange noises. Some turned back before even reaching the middle. Others ran when they heard the first echo of footsteps that were not their own. The tribe led Elias to the entrance. The canyon stretched ahead like a long, dark throat between tall stone walls. The shadows moved in odd shapes as the wind pushed through. Elias looked inside, then looked at the elders. "What must I do?" he asked. "Walk to the marked stone at the center," an elder said, "and bring back one of the feathers placed there. That is all." Elias nodded. He did not ask if there were animals. He did not ask if someone would follow him. He simply stepped inside. Marana watched him carefully. Unknown to him, she secretly followed from above the canyon walls, keeping her distance. She had done this before for other men. Not to guide them, but to see their true nature when no one was watching. Elias walked calmly through the narrow passage. The light became dimmer with each step. Loose stones rolled beneath his boots. Strange echoes bounced around him, soft howls mixed with the sound of wind brushing against the stone. Any man unfamiliar with such noises would imagine creatures lurking, but Elias had grown up living near forests and open lands. He had heard worse sounds in storms and when coyotes moved near his barn at night. So he kept walking, listening, but not panicking. At one point, a sudden growl echoed from somewhere deep inside the canyon. Elias stopped. His heart beat faster, but he did not turn around. The air felt heavier. The growl came again, softer this time, from higher ground. Elias glanced up and saw glowing eyes watching him from a ledge. It was a mountain cat. He froze, respecting its space. The animal studied him for a long moment, its tail flicking. Elias slowly lowered his gaze to appear non-threatening. After a few seconds, the cat turned away and disappeared into the rocks. Up on the canyon ridge, Marana witnessed everything. Her breath had caught in fear when she first saw the animal watching him. She had seen men scream at smaller shadows. But Elias did not yell or run. He simply understood the creature and let it be. Marana pressed a hand to her chest, feeling something unusual. An emotion she had forgotten. Hope. Elias reached the marked stone, picked up one feather lying there, and turned around. The walk back was just as dark, just as silent, but he kept a steady pace until he stepped out into the sunlight again. The tribe waited for him there. Some looked amazed. Others clapped. Even the elders smiled in relief. The third test was one of honor. It was held near a long table covered with items the tribe considered valuable: woven blankets, decorated bowls, polished stones, and small handmade weapons. The elder explained that these were meant to tempt the man. If he was greedy, if he reached for anything that was not offered, he would fail the test. Elias listened quietly. He felt no desire to take anything. He had everything he needed back at his ranch. And even if he didn't, he had never been a man who took what was not his. The test was simple. He had to walk past the table and choose nothing. Many men before him failed because they tried to take at least one item, pretending they deserved it after the trials. Elias walked slowly beside the table, looking at the crafts with respect. "These are beautiful," he said softly, not touching anything. When he reached the end of the line, he nodded and stepped back. "I'm done." The elders exchanged approving looks. The honor test was complete. After all 3 tests, the tribe gathered around a large fire pit for a small ceremony. People sat on logs or blankets while food was cooked. The air was warm with the smell of roasted corn and herbs. Elias sat quietly near the fire, sipping warm tea the tribe offered. He felt tired, but peaceful. He had not done the tests to impress anyone. He had done them because he gave his word. Marana approached him slowly. She stood near him for a moment, unsure how to begin. Elias looked up at her and smiled calmly. She sat beside him, though she still towered over him, even seated. Her voice was low when she spoke. "I did not think you would finish all 3. Elias shrugged lightly. "They asked. I agreed. So I kept going." Marana looked at the fire. "Other men tried to show they were greater than me. They wanted the reward. But you..." She paused, trying to understand him. "Why did you stay so calm?" 80. Why did you stay so calm?" Elias answered simply. "Because there was no reason to fear anything." Marana blinked, taken aback. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Men always spoke about her strength, her size, or their pride. But Elias spoke as if everything was normal. As the evening turned into night, the tribe prepared the final tradition. Elias learned that the last test was not really a test at all. It was a night spent inside Marana's lodge, a large wooden structure built to fit her size and her needs. The purpose was to see if 2 people could share a quiet space without fear, without unease. Many men had walked inside with her but rushed out before the moon reached the middle of the sky. Elias stood outside the lodge, looking at the tall doorway. Marana waited silently beside him, unsure if he would change his mind at the last moment. The tribe watched from a respectful distance. Elias looked at Marana and gave her a small, sincere smile. "If you're ready," he said softly, "I'm ready." She opened the wooden door, her hand steady but her heart uncertain. Elias stepped inside with calm footsteps, not looking back, even once. The door closed behind them, and the quiet lodge became their world for the night. The tribe whispered among themselves, wondering what the morning would bring. Some believed Elias would run just like the others. Others felt something different this time, something gentle and steady. And high above them all, on her own balcony outside the lodge, the giant bride watched the moon and hoped that, for the first time in her life, someone might stay. The inside of Marana's lodge felt different from anything Elias had ever seen. The wooden walls were carved with symbols, some shaped like mountain peaks, others like flowing rivers. Everything inside was large not to show off, but to match Marana's size. The chairs were tall, the table wide, and the roof beams stretched high enough that even she could walk without bending her head. Elias looked around slowly, taking in every detail. Nothing about the place frightened him. Instead, he felt a strange peacefulness, as if the lodge carried years of stories he had yet to understand. Marana stood near the doorway for a moment after closing it. She seemed unsure where to sit or how close to stand. She had lived here for years, yet in this moment, she looked almost nervous. Elias noticed her hesitation and spoke gently. His simple words surprised her. Most men commented on how big everything was. Some made jokes to hide their fear. Others said nothing at all, too overwhelmed by her presence. But Elias spoke plainly, without discomfort. Marana walked toward the fire pit at the center of the lodge and added a few logs to keep the flames steady. She motioned for Elias to sit where he felt comfortable. He chose a smaller stool near the fire, while she sat on a larger bench across from him. For a few minutes, only the crackling fire broke the silence. Elias waited patiently, letting her speak first if she wished. Marana looked into the flames, then finally turned her eyes toward him. "You are calm," she said softly. "Even here." Elias nodded. "Should I not be?" Marana shook her head slowly. "Other men, they shake, even if they try to hide it. They think I don't notice. Some pretend to be brave. Some brag about how strong they are. Some sit far away from me. But you," she paused, as if searching for the right words. "You act like this is normal." Elias smiled gently. "Maybe it is normal. You're a person. This is your home. What is strange about that?" Marana stared at him, unsure how to answer. She had lived her whole life being treated as something unusual, something to fear or avoid. Men did not see her as a person with thoughts and feelings. They saw her height first, her strength second, and her loneliness never. Elias's simple acceptance touched something deep inside her that she had never shared with anyone. Outside, the wind began to grow stronger. The night sky darkened, and clouds rolled over the mountains. A strong storm was forming. The tribe had expected some wind, but this storm arrived faster than usual. Thunder rumbled in the distance as rain began to fall in heavy drops. The lodge creaked softly as the wind pushed against its wooden frame. Inside, Marana listened closely. "The wind is strong tonight," she said, her voice calm but alert. Elias nodded. "Storms are common where I live. My roof shakes sometimes too." A sudden gust hit the lodge, shaking the walls harder than before. One of the shutters rattled loudly. Without hesitation, Elias stood up and walked to the window. "One of the bars is loose," he said. "I'll fix it." Marana blinked. But he was already adjusting the wooden latch, holding the frame steady. When the wind hit again, he kept his grip firm, pressing the shutter back into place. His hands were smaller than hers, but his movements were sure and confident. Marana rose from her bench and stepped beside him. She reached out one hand and held the top of the shutter, her strength making the wood stop moving instantly. Together, they secured it tightly before stepping back. Elias wiped dust from his hands. "That should hold for now." Marana looked at him with a hint of disbelief. "Most men would have stayed back," she said. "The noise alone frightens them." Elias shrugged lightly. "Storms don't listen to fear. You fix what you can and let the rest pass." Marana felt something warm stir in her chest. His calmness was not fake. It was real, grounded, and steady. She had never met anyone who treated danger or discomfort the way he did. They both returned to the fire. The storm outside grew louder. The wind roared through the mountain path, and rain hit the roof like scattered pebbles. But inside, the fire kept the lodge warm. Elias sat with his hands around a warm cup of herbal tea Marana had brewed earlier. She finally relaxed enough to sit closer, though not too close. After a moment, she began to speak again. Her voice was soft, almost unsure. Do you wonder why I warn men? Why I say those words? Elias looked at her calmly. If you want to tell me, I'm listening. Marana took a slow breath. It is not because I wish to scare anyone. It is because every time a man entered this lodge, he left before dawn. Some ran in fear. Some said they could not be near a woman of my size. Some said they felt small beside me. Others blamed me for their own weakness. Elias listened without interrupting. Marana continued, her hands gently folded in her lap. The tribe built this lodge for me when I became of age. They said one day I would find someone. But every year that passed, I began to believe it less. Men would arrive full of pride and leave full of shame. She looked into the fire again. I did not want to hope anymore, so I began warning them, not to frighten them, but to prepare myself. If they left, I could say to myself, you told them. You knew they would go. Elias felt a quiet sadness settle inside him. Not for himself, but for her. It must have been hard, he said softly. Marana nodded. It was lonely. The tribe cares for me. They respect me. But respect is not the same as companionship. She looked at him with cautious eyes. You look at me like I am a person. Others look at me like I am a challenge. Elias rested his elbows on his knees and leaned forward slightly. Everyone deserves someone who sees them clearly, he said. Not for size, not for strength, not for fear, but for who they are. Marana felt her heart beat faster. No man had spoken such simple truth to her. She had heard compliments about her strength, about her bravery, even about her beauty, from those who tried too hard. But never had she heard someone speak to her like Elias did, without trying to impress her, without trying to shrink away. The storm grew stronger suddenly. A loud crack echoed through the lodge as one of the roof beams shifted slightly. Elias stood at once, looking up. One of the beams is loose. Marana frowned. It has been weeks since last winter. The wind may push it. 2. Before she could finish, another gust hit the lodge, making the beam creak loudly. Elias moved quickly under it, pushing upward with both hands to hold it steady. The beam was too heavy for any ordinary man to support alone, but Elias pressed with all the strength he had, his arms trembling slightly. He shouted without fear, "Marana, help me!" She rushed to his side, placing her large hands on the center of the beam. With one firm push, she steadied it easily. Her strength made the beam return to its place. Elias stepped back, breathing heavily but relieved. You should not have done that alone, she said, her voice tight with concern. You were right here, he replied, smiling weakly. I knew you would help. Marana felt a warmth spread through her chest again, something unfamiliar yet comforting. She had always been the one people feared, the one others tried to avoid. But Elias trusted her strength without hesitation. He depended on her during the moment of danger, and not once did he act ashamed of needing her help. When the storm finally began to calm, the two of them sat near the fire again. Elias's shirt was dusty from the falling debris, and Marana gently handed him a cloth to clean himself. He accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you." They talked for hours afterward. Elias shared stories from his ranch about a stubborn horse that refused to learn commands, about long summers when he repaired his father's fences, and about nights he spent listening to the wind. Marana shared memories of growing up in the mountains, climbing high ridges, learning the tribe's traditions, and the day she first realized no man her age was brave enough to stand beside her. As the night deepened and the fire softened, they fell into a comfortable silence. Marana looked at Elias with a gentle expression, one she had not worn in many years. "You are not afraid of me," she said. "You've given me no reason to be," Elias answered simply. The lodge grew quiet. The storm faded. The fire crackled softly. And for the first time in Marana's life, a man shared the long night with her without fear, without pretending, and without rushing to leave. When the first light of dawn touched the mountains outside, Marana rose and opened the lodge door. Elias stepped out beside her, stretching his tired arms. The tribe was already gathering outside, their eyes widening as they saw the two standing together, not troubled, not frightened, but peaceful. They had survived the storm. They had survived the night. And most of all, they had understood each other. The morning air felt fresh and cool as Elias and Marana stepped out of the lodge. The storm had washed the dust from the ground, leaving the earth dark and clean. The sky above the mountains was a soft blue, and the first sunlight stretched across the village like a warm welcome. But the tribe stood still in silence, staring at the two of them. They had never seen a man stand beside Marana so calmly after a night in her lodge. Most men came out shaken or embarrassed. Some refused to look at her. Some hurried away without waiting for the elders. But Elias looked rested, peaceful, almost as if he had spent the night in his own home. Marana stood straight beside him, her tall frame casting a long shadow behind them. For the first time, she did not look tense or guarded. The elders stepped forward slowly. Their faces showed surprise, then relief, and finally curiosity. The oldest among them, a man with white hair braided down his back, looked at Elias carefully. "You walked out at dawn," he said. "You did not run. You did not avoid her. Tell us, how was the night?" Elias took a moment to think before answering. He did not exaggerate or hide anything. "We talked," he said simply. "We listened to each other. A storm came, and we kept the lodge safe. It was a good night." The tribe murmured among themselves. They were used to dramatic stories, men boasting about surviving fear or danger. But Elias spoke with honesty and simplicity. Marana looked at him quietly, feeling a warmth grow in her chest again. She had feared that once they stepped outside, he might act differently. But he did not. He remained exactly the same. The eldest woman from the tribe looked at Marana. "Your heart," she said softly. "What does it say?" Marana took a slow breath. She looked at Elias, then at the tribe. Her voice was steady. "My heart is calm. For the first time," she said. "He did not fear me. He did not pretend. He respected my strength and respected my home. He did not treat me like a challenge. He treated me like a person." The tribe listened carefully. Marana glanced at Elias once more. "I choose him," she said, her voice honest and clear. "If he chooses me." Elias felt a gentle surprise, but not fear. He had not come here to seek marriage or reward. He had come out of curiosity, out of respect for the traders, and because he wanted to understand her truth. But standing there, hearing her speak with such sincerity, he realized that something had changed inside him during the night. He had seen her strength, yes, but more importantly, he had seen her kindness, her patience, her loneliness, and her quiet hope for a life where someone understood her. He stepped forward and spoke clearly. The tribe erupted in cheers, laughter, and cries of joy. Children ran between the adults. Women clapped their hands. Men smiled with relief. The storm had frightened them, but now it felt like a blessing. Even the winds seemed to have pushed Elias and Marana closer together. The elders announced that preparations for a union ceremony would begin. Though Elias and Marana did not need to be married that very moment, the tribe believed in honoring the beginning of a bond. They brought garlands made of mountain flowers, woven cloths dyed in bright colors, and handmade gifts for the couple. Elias stood humbly as people offered him small tokens of welcome bracelets, decorated stones, and painted feathers. He accepted each gift with quiet gratitude. Marana received her own share of blessings. Women from the tribe hugged her gently, though she bent down for each one. They whispered kind words, happy that she had finally found someone who did not fear her. Children stared up at her with wide smiles, no longer seeing her as a distant figure of strength, but as someone who belonged among them. Through all of this, Elias stayed near her side. Not because he felt trapped or watched, but because he wanted to be there. When the tribe brought food, fresh bread, roasted vegetables, and warm tea, they sat together on a raised wooden platform overlooking the village. The wind had softened, carrying the scent of pine trees from the mountains. Marana looked at Elias quietly. "You do not look overwhelmed," she said. Elias took a sip of tea. "Should I be?" She smiled slightly. Many men feel small when the tribe celebrates like this. Elias shrugged. Maybe it is the first time they celebrate the right two people together. Her smile grew wider, softer. She was not used to smiling so often, and it surprised even her how natural it felt around him. The celebration stretched through the morning. Musicians played drums and flutes. Children danced in circles. Elders blessed the couple in gentle rhythms of speech. But by early afternoon, Elias felt it was time to speak with Marana privately. He walked with her toward the tree line near the edge of the village, where the ground was soft with fallen leaves. They stopped under a tall pine tree. Elias looked up at her with calm eyes. "I want to ask you something," he said. Marana tilted her head. "Ask. Are you choosing me because I survived the night?" Elias asked. "Or because you believe we could build a life together?" Marana's expression softened. She knelt slightly so her eyes were closer to his level. "I choose you because you are the first man who ever saw me without fear," she said. "You listened to me. You trusted me during the storm. You did not run. You did not treat me like something to win. You treated me like a partner." Elias nodded slowly. "Then we will build something good together." Marana placed her large hand gently over his. Even though her hand was bigger, her touch was soft, respectful. Elias felt no pressure, only warmth. A little later, the elders approached them again. They explained that Elias could stay with the tribe if he wished. They would give him his own space, close to Marana's lodge. But Elias surprised them with another idea. He said he had a ranch, quiet, peaceful, full of open sky. He asked Marana if she would like to see it. Marana's eyes widened. No man had ever asked her to join his world. They always wanted her to remain in the mountains, where she seemed less unusual. But Elias wanted to share his life openly. He wanted her to see where he came from. "I would like that," she said softly. The tribe prepared supplies for their journey. They gave Marana a long walking cloak, and Elias a travel pack filled with dried fruit, herbs, and bread. People waved as the two walked away together, heading down the mountain path. The journey to the ranch took a day and a half. They spoke during the walk, sometimes sharing stories, sometimes walking in comfortable silence. Elias led the way, along familiar trails. Marana looked around at the open plains with curiosity. She had spent her entire life among tall mountains and deep valleys. The wide sky impressed her, and the gentle rolling fields felt peaceful. When they finally reached Elias's ranch, Marana stopped to take it all in. The house was small but clean. The fences stretched across the land like straight lines drawn by a steady hand. Horses grazed lazily in their pens. Chickens clucked near the barn. It was quiet, peaceful, beautiful. "This is your home," Marana said. Elias nodded. "It is." She looked around slowly. "It is simple, but it feels honest." Elias smiled. "Like me, I suppose." She glanced at him, then chuckled softly. "Maybe." Things changed quickly over the next few days. Marana began helping Elias with his work around the ranch. She lifted heavy hay bales with ease. She repaired a broken fence in minutes. She carried water barrels as if they weighed nothing. But she did everything carefully, never showing off, always respecting Elias's way of doing things. Elias handled the smaller tasks, feeding the animals, cleaning the barn, cooking simple meals. They shared quiet conversations in the evenings. Sometimes they spoke about the tribe. Sometimes Elias told stories from his childhood. Sometimes Marana told him about her early days in the mountains, how she learned to climb cliffs, how she carried supplies during harsh winters, how she dreamed of someone who would not fear her shadow. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Marana sat on the porch with Elias. The sky burned orange, the last light spreading across the ground like warm fire. Elias looked at her gently and asked, "Do you miss the tribe?" Marana nodded. "I miss them, but I do not feel lonely here." "That is new for me." Elias leaned back on the railing. "I'm glad." After a quiet moment, Marana turned to him. Her voice was soft. "Do you remember what I told you the first time we met?" Elias nodded. "You said, 'No man survived a night with me.'" Marana looked at him with deep eyes. "And yet, you stayed." Elias smiled warmly. "I didn't need to survive anything. I only needed to understand you." Marana felt her heart swell, steady and warm, as if something inside finally found its missing place. She reached out slowly and rested her hand over his, careful and gentle. Elias held her hand without hesitation, and on that peaceful porch, under the wide-open sky, the giant bride and the quiet rancher began a life built on trust, calm strength, and the simple courage to see each other as they truly were. Their story spread in quiet whispers across the land, not as a tale of fear, not as a tale of challenge, but as a story of two people who found peace in each other's presence. And neither of them ever walked alone again.